It's a movie perhaps made most famous by Paul Rudd, who had absolutely nothing to do with the movie in the first place. This episode has absolutely 0 tomatoes given, and we're joined today by Greg from Movie Date Night and Mortal Kombat to look at the fun that is Mac and Me and prove to you that it isn't that bad. Welcome to It Isn't That Bad, the podcast that looks at A grades in B movies. Hope you're doing well. You're gonna love this one because we got a guest this time. Introducing Greg from Movie Date Night and Mortal Kombat. Greg, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I am fantastic. I get to talk about one of my favorite movies.
I was going to say, so we're going to get to that movie in a second here. But first, let's tell us about you. What podcast are you on? What are those podcasts about? And introduce yourself. And then you need to spill the beans on why Mac and Me is such a good movie to you.
Oh, happily. So I am Greg. I am from Movie Date Night with my wife, Lauren, where we share movies with each other back and forth. The other one has never seen before. We also have a podcast called Friday is Game Nights, where we talk about board games, how to have a game night yourself, and escape rooms. And then also we are co-hosts on another one called Mortal Kombat, where we have pop culture tournaments, where we argue about things like what's the cutest baby animal, what's the best video game character, what's the most overrated 80s film. And then we go through a tournament style, and then the audience votes to decide the ultimate winner. And those can be found at Movie Date Night, at Game Friday, and at Mortal Kombat Pod, respectively.
You are literally like, the podcast creation factory, you guys, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. So why Mac and Me?
Why Mac and Me? Because I love this film ever since I was a kid. This is the genesis of my loving, quote, bad movies. But of course, we're here to talk about how it's such a great film. But if you're talking about, I think everyone has an origin story for why they like so bad it's good films, and this is mine. I remember my grandmother had a bunch of VHSs on this like kind of hanging rack on her closet door, and she was the one who would babysit me when I was a little kid, like kind of too young to go to kindergarten, but and we'd pop on VHSs all the time. So it was either this or Fern Gully day after day. So I think she liked this one more than the animated one about saving the rainforest. So this is the one I saw the most as a kid.
So basically, animated Avatar before Avatar was even a thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So as you know, on this show, our way to kind of introduce the movie is to take the synopsis and straight up trailerize it. So in this case, Greg, I'm going to hand the reins over to you. Trailerize it.
A mysterious alien creature, or Mac, escapes from nefarious NASA agents and is befriended by a wheelchair-using boy named Eric. Together, Eric and Mac try to find Mac's family from whom he has been separated.
Nice. Now, let's get into a little bit of the movie background here. So it's released in 1988, and we mentioned at the beginning of the show that Paul Rudd may be the person almost single-handedly credited for making this still a pop culture reference today. Tell us about the Paul Rudd gag.
So Paul Rudd did have a brief stint on Friends near the end of the series, if I remember correctly. And it started back then, but he still does it even today, where whenever he goes on a late night show talk circuit, like to, Jay Leno, Jimmy Fallon, whoever it was at the time, he always, they usually do do you want to see a clip of the most recent project I'm working on? So they say, yeah, let's go to the clip. And he always shows the clip of Eric in his wheelchair just tearing down this steep hill and then eventually falling off the hill, and the obvious special effect fail that is the dummy of this lifeless, crash dummy falling out of the chair just as it hits the water after about a 40-foot drop.
If you haven't seen, there are compilation clips of Paul Rudd on Conan O'Brien. So it's a moment. It's a moment of which I don't think Paul Rudd has actually aged at all from the beginning of the gag to.
Oh no, he's made a deal with the devil for certain for eternal youth. That's already been proven.
Yeah, I think I saw someone pointing out on Twitter a couple of days ago that forget all these makeup TikTok stars. I want Paul Rudd's skincare routine.
Yeah.
But let's talk about, who's actually in this movie. Some of the stars that people may be familiar with, the main one is the mom, Christine Ebersol. People might remember her from Richie Rich. And she was also more recently in The Wolf of Wall Street. But her first movies, like back to back, were like Tootsie and then Amadeus. So to be in like two of these, big name movies and then go to Mac and Me. But I mean, like, there's a lot of like small little roles in here where you're just like, oh, I didn't even realize that they were in there. The one that's kind of stuck out to me was Danny Cooksey. So the redheaded kid who's the best friend of Eddie Furlong in Terminator 2, but he's also, you got to raise your horns on this one, the lead singer of the band Bad for Good. Now, anyone who doesn't know Bad for Good, the band was basically built around this like Steve Vai prodigy guitar player, and Danny Cooksey is the singer. Like, they had like one album. I don't think they lasted longer than maybe a couple of months, but it was kind of cool. But there was also, I love that you mentioned Fern Gully, because Jonathan Ward is an actor in this film who was actually in Fern Gully. Yeah. Also was Dim Roles. But the funny thing I found about him was that he's the brother of Elizabeth Ward. People might remember her from a Jack Palance horror film called Alone in the Dark, but she was actually the original Carol Seaver in the pilot of Growing Pains.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. So when Growing Pains when first came out, there was a pilot. They obviously tested some different actors. So before we had our Carol Seaver, right? It was Elizabeth Ward, sister of Jonathan Ward from this movie. But the movie didn't get received all that well because it's got some Razzie love attached to it.
Yeah, it got 4 of those, but to counteract every single one of those Razzie Awards, it did get a Youth in Film Award nomination. 4 for 4.
It did. And it was. That's, I think, one of the things we're going to talk about is the kids in this film. But let's talk about the director, who did actually co-win for Worst Director, tied with Blake Edwards of Sunset. Which I find funny because, taking a look through Stephen Raffles, who was also the screenwriter of the film, he directed Ice Pirates and The Philadelphia Experiment. And Philadelphia Experiment kind of stands on its own, but I loved Ice Pirates. I thought Ice Pirates was just a fun film, which kind of came out around the same time as, Time Bandits and whatnot. So they had these almost like fantastical, excursion type movies. So he's got good cred. I think it was kind of like, he kind of got crapped on because the movie was getting crapped on at the time for being a bit of an E.T. knockoff.
Well, what happened, from what I've heard, is that when he was hired onto the project, they already had all the crew hired, and there was no script. And normally the director's one of the first people you hire once you have a script. So they kind of put the cart before the horse in this case. And they're like, everyone's already being on the clock paid. You need to figure this out now. So not only are they like, we want to capitalize upon the ET popularity, but also he's under the gun to get this done fast because your budget is bleeding every day that you don't start shooting. So I don't blame him for, it's kind of like, I love watching those cooking shows where they have people what's that, Nailed It, where they have average people trying to do a baking thing. And okay, yeah, maybe they could have made that if you give them time, but you only gave them 30 minutes. So this is the product that, you know what, that's amazing for 30 minutes for what you just pulled off. You should be proud of that. Thank you. Right.
But I think one of the, the bigger things weighing on him is, the money that was put into the movie by Coca-Cola and McDonald's. There's a lot of pressure when you have, those two monstrous entities that are putting that money in and basically say, no, but we got to do this and we got to do this and we got to do this. Not to mention the fact that Ronald McDonald won the Razzie for Worst New Star.
He did. And I remember one of the teaser trailers for the film is Ronald McDonald sitting in an actor's chair. He goes, "Hi, I'm Ronald McDonald. I'm going to be in my first film ever," as if he's going to have a career after this film. Or as if he's his own entity. And I just love that. It's as if Pee Wee Herman said, "I'm having my own movie. It's going to be a series of movies. And isn't this great?" Yeah, he did have a series of movies, but they were going based upon the same premise. A child's fictional character can be his own actor, his own thing. And it's yeah, but Pee-wee's not pushing hamburgers on kids.
But something good actually came out of it was the fact that part of the box office did actually go to Ronald McDonald House charities.
Yes.
Now, it didn't make a lot of money. It grossed only $6 million worldwide on a $13 million budget. So I don't know if, Ron McDonald had to pay the rest off in hamburgers, but some good that came out of it. Now, we mentioned at the beginning of the show that, 0 tomatoes were given in the making of this film. Mm-hmm. And at one point it did have a straight 0 Rotten Tomato score. So I took a look on it while I was doing my research. It's up to 4%.
I did see that. I was shocked because when I spoke to you on Twitter about this and you were saying, hey, who wants to do, I raised my hand with a little gif of the alien raised in his hand and say, I volunteer as tribute, Mac and me, 0%, let's swing for the fences. Let's go. I could talk about how great this film is. But yeah, it must have been that somebody put a review up that actually liked it. So it's starting to come around, I think.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like 4% tomato meter, which is basically all the proper critics, but it's got a 38% audience score.
Yeah.
Like, so it can't be all that bad.
Mm-mm. Like, it's no, what's that John Travolta movie, that Gotti? It's not Gotti, where like it's painful to watch and like it's intolerable. Like, we're constantly checking your clock, like, how much longer do I have? This movie, okay, granted, it may not be like a cinema blockbuster, as we've talked about with the budget already, but it has its fun moments and it's enjoyable to get through. Plus it's got a decent running time of, I think, about 80 minutes or so. So it's not going to be like, torture of an intolerable length by any far stretch of the imagination. And by far stretch, of course, I do mean like the puppet of Mac when he's on the electric fence being blown out by the helicopter.
Yeah, they never really defined what their abilities were. I'm like, is he part Mr. Fantastic? I'm not quite sure.
Oh, so I've thought about this for years, believe you me, because this is a great movie. And I believe I have the answer for you. I believe that Mac and his family are rubber-based life forms because they were able to morph and bend their bodies freely, it seems. They're able to maintain that shape for a brief amount of time. When Mac first escapes the NASA facility, he does stretch himself out. He turns himself into almost a barrel shape while rolling towards the street, flattens against the windshield, and it's fine. They also can hold what seems to be an electric charge. So since rubber is not a conductor, the electricity would go into his body, have nowhere to go until he touched something else. So Mac is a rubber-based life form, just like the McDonald's hamburgers.
So literally, he's the combination of Mr. Fantastic and Shazam.
Yeah,
I'm down with that. See, now we need a Mac and me part of like one of the superhero universes, and we're fine.
And that's why their planet's dead, because they just have an all-out civil war. That's a prequel I want.
It's like the beginning of Terminator 2, but it's Mac and me.
Yeah, exactly.
Still with Danny Cooksey.
Yeah, that's right. He was in that too. He
right?
was the punk arcade friend. Yeah, who's like in there for 2 minutes.
So let's get to the breakdown here. This is where we break it down section by section. Greg, we're going to start with you. Let's take a look at some of your acting positive notes of Mac and me.
Okay. Listen, a lot of people give a lot of slack to children actors. They say like, oh, they're always so whiny. They're always so annoying. Listen, I've been in plenty of long car rides with my siblings. The banter between Eric and his brother is exactly what it sounded like in my car. What is the actor's name who played Eric? I have it written here. Jade Calgary. For a first-time acting gig, I think he's doing amazing. I think he's a lot better than a lot of other child actors who are, quote, professionals were doing around his same age. And I'm on board for it. I mean, granted, a lot of the scenes in here are mostly him just kind of staring around going, what's going on? But when he's actually acting and reading his lines, it's not bad. Like I said, it's not maybe the greatest of all time, but it's also not the very absolute worst.
I think one of the nice things is because he's, his character's in a wheelchair, but Jade Calgary actually has spina bifida. So, so it's one of the situations where, there's always a lot of talk of like, if you're showing, a handicapped person in a film, why not hire a handicapped actor? Mm-hmm. Lo and behold, Mac and me was ahead of the game.
Yes.
And put him in the role. And you're right. He was actually enjoyable to watch, like you said, our child actor is always going to be, as good as you want them to be, kind of thing. Are they going to emote well? Maybe not, but it's also the 80s, right? Like, yeah, it's a kids movie with kids, and I think the kids kind of really played well enough in it too. One of the also things that I liked about it, you mentioned like the whole sibling talking to each other in the car thing, but the mom, you know, really played off the fact that she's a good, caring mom who's really doing whatever she can to make sure, you know, that her youngest son, who's in a wheelchair, has everything that they need. And the family scenes, especially in the beginning of the film, before like the whole, you know, before they encounter Mac, you know, there's a lot of really good, not overstated. It's not like they served it up on silver platters, like, you know, he's got a handicap, you know, and made a big thing about it. It was just like, yeah, he's got a handicap, and this is what we did. And it's kind of glossed over, but I think it's better that it's glossed over.
Well, it's kind of like how people are talking about to portray alternate sexuality characters nowadays, you know, where they don't have to be all this stereotypical, like, super flamboyant gay best friend of hello kind of thing. It's why can't we have a character who just chooses a different sexuality or gender preference, but is like a normal human being, you know? So here it's okay. Yeah, Eric's in a wheelchair. No big deal. Let's move on with our lives. You know, like it's not necessarily an integral part of the story. There's not any moment where like, darn, if only someone who was in a wheelchair was here, we could make this work. You know, it just, he happens to be in a wheelchair. And I think that's a fantastic choice. Yeah, because I mean, if I'm being honest, I think the reason why they may want to have chosen that is to help distance them even more from E.T. Because listen, at the end of the day, every conversation is going to be, how do we make ourselves as close to E.T. without getting our butt sued in court? That's what the conversation must have been at the end of every single meeting that they had. And I think in my honest opinion, they were like, we got to recreate the bike scene. We got to recreate the bike scene, but if we put him on a bike, that's not going to fly. What if we take the wheels, instead of having them be front and back, we put him side to side. Oh, wheelchair, there you go. You know, so I kind of feel like that might have been the conversation that was had behind closed doors. But like I said, it's not a big deal. And you're right. The mom is also great because when she goes and they come to the new house, she's pointing out all the features that a young boy in a wheelchair would want to appreciate. Like, look at low counters. You can reach everything. See, why we're going to keep the wide hallways here so that way you can move up and down freely. So you get a sense that the life that they are moving out of from Illinois and Chicago, maybe it was more of a cramped apartment. Maybe it was like a walk-up of some kind that he had to deal with. And now he's got a nice and easy and ADA compliant home. So he can actually go in and out of the house on his own without the need of his brother or mother to help him.
I think one of the other nice things that they did with the mom was that there's this trope where, you know, the kid sees something the parent doesn't, and then the parent gets mad at the kid, right? And then thinks it's, you know, everything bad is their fault. But they never really went down that way. It's just like, it's almost like she's taking it in as, well, this is their way of coping with all the changes that's going on. So I'm not going to get mad. I'm not going to overreact. I'm just going to like, this is their coping mechanism. They see an alien that I don't see. So I'm just going to.
No, what's great is that in the scene where Mac, for reasons beyond our understanding, because it's Mac and his mind is genius and glorious and beautiful, he brings the outside inside, where he puts like the fake deer there, all the piles of dirt and flowers and stuff. And he essentially ruins the living room. The mother has a momentary freak and like, oh my God, what's going on? But then she turns to Eric and essentially like, are you okay? How can I help you? Because she, like you said, she's not mad. She's a little bit frustrated, but then she's like, how do I help fix the situation for my son, who's clearly having some kind of a psychological lashing out?
There's a lot of positive parental things about that character that she brought that I don't think maybe has gone mentioned in that. But I do have to ask, because it kind of comes across to me that no one freaks out in this movie.
No.
Ever. You know, aliens walk into the grocery store. One of them's got a gun. Their first response is customer service. Not security, customer service. You know, they pull up to the gas station. The girl looks over. There's aliens in the van. I'm not going to freak out. They reach out and grab a drink. Now I'm going to freak out. It's almost like, how weird was California in the 80s that people didn't freak out over liver-spotted aliens walking around naked in Volkswagen camper vans.
I think if you want to have the answer to that, you need to go watch Cheech and Chong's Up in Smoke, because that'll be a lot of your answers right there. But yeah, like the only person I can really think of that freaks out, or well, two, is one, the security guard in the grocery store, where he starts to do the whole like nervous security guard holding the gun at them, and then immediately just gives the gun up to the alien who did not ask for it. But then the only other time I can think of is Debbie, the girl next door friend, where when the family first rolls up and Mac hops out of the car, she's like, the hell is that thing? For like one time. And then later she's on the balcony going, oh, is that your little friend? I saw him run this way. Yeah. She immediately jumps on board and is like, yeah, I'm cool. I'm communing with nature spirits. I'm 8. Yeah, let's go.
One of the characters actually did, I think, for lack of a better term, emote properly kind of thing is Tina Kasparian. She's the woman that played Courtney, who was Debbie's big sister. Mm-hmm. And we didn't really get to see too much of her in the beginning of the film. And then all of a sudden she and, the big brother are dating, and it's like, when did that happen? So kind of a script oversight, but she came across to me as, especially near the end. Like, I'm not going to tell you what happens in the end, dear listeners, but because spoilers, but she was the one that almost seemed to be reacting the most realistically, towards Eric and, kind of what happened. That's as much as I'm going to say, but I think she actually, probably deserved a bigger role because it looked like she was bringing the proper amount of emotion to the scenes.
Yeah. I'm kind of reminded of the line from Men in Black that people are panicky, a person is smart. I think I said that backwards, but like if you take an alien and put him into a grocery store with a whole bunch of people, the general energy of the entire group is going to be freak out. But if you give it to a single person one at a time, like how we do with Courtney, she'll freak out for a moment, but then she'll come to her senses and be like, okay, well, they're not directly attacking me right now. So let's test the situation, see how safe this is. Because when she first meets Mac, she's very hesitant at first, but then she quickly realizes, oh, I don't see any fangs. I don't see any like death ray in his hand. He seems to be nice. He almost is making like kind of a weird whistling, purring noise. Maybe he's okay. So she actually has the most genuine, I think a real person would have in a situation like this, reaction.
All right. So let's jump to the script here for a second. Mm-hmm. Again, a lot of people were talking about, if E.T., it's an E.T. knockoff, basically, funded by McDonald's and Coca-Cola. Mm-hmm. But, as you mentioned, Stephen Raffel had like not a lot of time to put this whole thing together.
Mm-mm. So the script is a bit wanting, in my opinion. Like some of the dialogue that the family has, especially near the beginning, is kind of, I'm not a script writer. I feel like I could bang that out. Like, oh, pretty nice. Like, hey, this house is pretty nice. Okay, let's find a new adjective other than pretty nice for this home. But, as the film goes on, we do at least have some interesting scenes, like conversations between Eric and Debbie, where they're talking about what is Mac. Oh, he's a little goblin, is he a little goblin buddy? No, he's not. One of the scenes I actually just watched just before we started was Eric is hunting down Mac for the first time, and he goes outside following the footprints. And Debbie says, "Oh, are you looking for your friend? He ran down the hill." And goes, "Yeah, did you see him? What does he look like?" And she goes, "Isn't he your friend?" He goes, "Oh yeah, I was just playing with you." Like, I liked that part because that's how kids would be. They would, try to lie, get caught in a lie, and then immediately try to recover. So I liked at least that kind of intelligent script writing there of how a child would have this conversation. Because if it was an adult, they might play it a bit more smart, a bit more to the chest. But kids a bit more, cards at the table. Let's just talk about what I actually know and don't know. And then, oh, I didn't mean to show you that. Let me take that back.
It was almost like, it's almost like as he was writing it, he was thinking of, and I don't know if he has kids or not, or, if he does have kids, were they that age at that time? But it did very much sound like, he's heard these conversations, in the neighborhood or in his home at the time. I do have to point out, and I know I try not to bring up anything, bad about it. So it's just very interesting. This has to have one of the most random, out of context lines of dialogue that I think I heard, and it's just a throwaway. But it's one of those things where you all of a sudden your ears perk up. It's like, did I just hear that right? So there's this scene where the mom is in the department store. I think that's where she's working, and
Macy's or something, yeah, or Sears.
Exactly. And she's going up the escalator as Eric gets there and starts calling for her. But, they come into the conversation where she's talking to, I guess, one of her coworkers. And it's just the line of dialogue as they come in. It's like, how long have you been in lingerie? And if you if you just come into that conversation, you have to sit there and go, I needed to hear more of that conversation. Were they talking about work, or is there something that we need to know about this guy?
Right. I mean, maybe he just admitted that he is a big Edgar J. Hoover fan.
I'm all for that. But we do have to point out McDonald's Flash Mob for the win.
Yes. I thought this is what McDonald's were like back in the 80s. And I was like, did I miss something? Why is my McDonald's? When do they schedule this? Because it's not going to be every day, but we got to show up for when they do the Flash Mob bomb.
Right? I mean, I get it's the 80s. I get, random characters breaking out in dance routines was a thing around that time. But first of all, McDonald's Flash Mob, phenomenal name for a band.
Yeah, right. Second of all, to this Flash Mob, they got young Jennifer Aniston and Nikki Cox to show up.
Nikki Cox's very first role, actually. So, yeah, I mean, the Jennifer Aniston thing, makes sense now with the Paul Rudd appearing on Friends and whatnot. But yeah, like it's now time to spot the friend in the McDonald's Flash Mob, and I'm all for it. Not that the dancing was great, but
better than I've ever pulled off. That's what I say.
But I mean, all in all, I mean, it is an enjoyable script. But the set and costume design. Let's talk about the aliens.
Okay, I'm here to talk about that all day. Let's go. The aliens, to me, as a kid, I didn't notice this, but as an adult who's rewatched this many times, it is weird that they are nude in the beginning. They find random pieces of cloth while they're wandering through the deserts and are trying to apparently clothe or, shield themselves. And in the end, I mean, of course, at the end, once they integrate society is going to be like, we're more prudish than you need to put on clothes. But it feels like I'm being told the nude that they were in the beginning may not be appropriate. And because these aliens are definitely gendered, or at least what we would transplant as our gender and typical family structure onto them. I think we can agree there is definitely a father figure, a mother figure, what appears to me at least to be an older sister, and then Mac, who I think would be arguably the baby boy.
It's basically the Incredibles, but they're aliens and they come from some planet near Saturn.
And they're all just Elastigirl. Yeah.
Pretty much. Although that being said, if we're making comic book references, anyone who complains about, Naked Thing in Josh Trank's Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
Like literally just watch the liver spotted aliens, walk around and stick straws into the ground and drink. There you go.
Yeah.
But it also leads to some of the cinematography and the directing.
Well, hold on. Let's go back 1 second. Sorry to interrupt you. I have more costume to talk about.
Ooh.
I cannot let you move on until we talk about the dancing teddy bear.
Yes.
Dancing teddy bear is one of the best scenes in this movie. And what I love so much about it is they had two choices. Assuming that they're going to go with dancing teddy bear. Either we just get a legit good looking teddy bear costume and we stuff it full of fluff so it looks like an actual teddy bear, or we do what would have happened in real life where here's a teddy bear that we rip the stuff out enough and then now we're going to put anorexic Mac into it so the skin's going to be hanging all loose and it's going to look like he is swimming in this thing.
I'm having flashbacks now from the first Men in Black film. So almost like Matt needs to walk around going, I need sugar and water in the Edgar suit.
This thing fits him like an Edgar suit. Exactly. And you can clearly see his weird eyes behind it that are blinking. So even if you tell all the greatest lies in history about how, it's got microchips and it's my robot teddy bear. Okay, but why is it staring into my soul?
And it's funny you mentioned that. I need to bring up the orgy of evidence that this family is from Chicago.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's go.
Like everything, Chicago Bears shirts, Chicago Cubs shirts. No love for the White Sox, no love for the Blackhawks. But
I noticed that. No, yeah. Apparently they're not a big hockey family.
Which, okay, let's be honest. NHL probably had the best video games. Obviously later in the 90s, but come on, 80s Blackhawks weren't that bad, and the Cubs were closing in on what 80, 90 years at that point without a championship.
Listen, their father, who we see in one picture, which I'm assuming he is now post-mortem, he clearly was a big Cubs fan, and he goes, boys, we're going to go to the games. We're going to go, and eventually they'll pull through.
And it is the 80s, so duh Bears.
Duh Bears. Yeah, that's probably what it was. Duh Bears. But yeah. It's not like I would have loved if Eric was like, you guys, where's a good hot dog place?
But yes, the orgy of evidence that says this is where they are. It's like the sweaters were character development. Yeah,
pretty much. It's just put them in something that has the Chicago Cubs C on it. Sure, why not?
Exactly. Also, and we're getting to this here. As far as the cinematography goes, right? That opening scene on Mac's home world, it is so well done.
Yeah.
Like the matte painting background. I don't know what planet they're supposed to be on. Given its proximity to Saturn, I'm going to say Jupiter, but.
Oh, was that? Well, okay. That's a good point. I never thought about that. I guess we should assume that this is in our solar system, because that never occurred to me as what planet are they on? It's a foreign planet to me. But yeah, you're right. It probably should be something like that.
But then again, Jupiter is supposed to be like this gas planet. So maybe it's on Uranus, but.
Oh, I can go and check. I mean, the liver spots line up, but I'll check my Uranus again.
Yeah, considering how fast NASA got there and back, has to be in the solar system. But it is really well shot. It's well designed. I mean, yeah, it's the 80s. They're going to be shooting in a desert, but the color grading too. Like they did a really good job of setting the tone right up until, of course, they CGI'd them into the vacuum cleaner.
And what's great about it being on a different planet is that if they have a different atmosphere, you can actually get away with a lot more color grading than that, because you can just argue on this planet, everything looks red or everything looks green or everything looks purple because of the atmosphere and just the, light spectrum of light coming in through the atmosphere. So, but yeah, I definitely agree with you. The shots on the planet were great. It really feels like a very desolate planet. Like there's this, I forget what it was, but there's this game that I played way back on the PlayStation 2 where essentially the main story is that like one of the characters was the last human alive and he gets sent back in time. And like you get a glimpse of him in his original timeline where he's literally the last human alive, and it's just a desert wasteland because all humanity's died out. And it's kind of like that. Like, I wonder, is Mac and his family the last of their kind? Did they drink their planet dry and that's why they seem to be struggling on their own planet?
There is so much more about the Mac and Me world I now want to know.
Right. Like, and I mean, what is their hope for the future? Because, okay, here's the thing. Mac's clearly intelligent and his family's clearly intelligent and they clearly have a language of their own. And I mean, we have to know that they are intelligent, can understand language because they passed the citizenship test. You have to pass at least an oral and written test to be a citizen of the United States, unless it's an honorary thing. And they also drive a car. They get a driver's license at the end of the movie. So, like, I would love to know their story about, like, man, we thought this is it. We're just going to, wander until we can't wander anymore. Like, that's a bleak movie it starts with. And when they get sucked into that NASA vacuum cleaner, that is the best thing that ever could have happened to them. And the special effects for that, of how they just essentially turn into like a flat image and then stretch it out so it looks like they're going into the tube. I love it. I love those effects.
And once they're on Earth and whatnot, like just a lot of the camera work. There's the nice low down shots when the remote control cars are being driven around by themselves. Even the scene when they're at NASA and the aliens kind of bust out of the lander. There's a lot a lot of good cinematography in this for an 80s movie. It's not surprising because the director of photography is Nick McLean, who was DOP on Goonies and Short Circuit 2.
Ah, okay.
I
mean, there you can kind of see that there then. Yeah. I think what really makes the cinematography stand out is that, a lot of the scenes are shot from a lower perspective, from Eric and Mac's height. If you think about E.T., a lot of the beginning scenes where we're getting to know E.T. are from the lower heights. But then once we know him, the camera resumes back up to at least the older brother's height, if not like an adult's height. And now we're just ourselves, the audience, watching into this room. But for Mac and me, the camera stays low a lot. And I think that is kind of part of its character. Yeah, that this is Eric and Mac's story. It's not the older brother's story. It's not the mom's story. They are the ones telling it, so it's going to be from their perspective.
It was definitely handled with, I know 80s camera work has a look. If you watch, again, Short Circuit was mentioned. There's at least Short Circuit 2. But like all those family-friendly 80s movies, they were filmed a certain way that no one felt really in danger because of the way the camera work was. No one felt like, too much blinking lights or something like that because of the way the camera work was. And this fits right in there with that comfortable family 80s viewing.
Right. There's not any fast camera movements from side to side or anything. If anything, one of the scenes I always do like is whenever the quote alien or creatures trying to hide from the person. And what's interesting is that this movie starts off the very first scene. We get a clear, unobstructed look of Mac and his family. We get a good solid 90 seconds of just, here's what they look like. And then when Mac gets into the car and is hiding from Eric, they do a lot to obscure him, but also it's more obscuring him from Eric and the family, not from the audience, which I thought was an interesting choice. Because in any other movie, Mac would have been obscured from the audience as well. He would have been hiding behind a thing and we would have only just seen the top of his head or just the tip of his fingers. But here we do see Mac hiding behind the door because, like I said, it's partially his story as well.
And a lot of, because they would go back and forth to these scenes of like the rest of the family, the rest of the alien family in the desert, looking for Mac, or at least looking for someplace to go. And there was a lot of good use of silhouette work.
Yes,
they're shooting out in the desert. You've got the sun, work with it and make it work for you. And, for an 80s movie, for an 80s family movie, it was visually pleasing.
Yeah. I'm willing to bet that you could even put that as a side-by-side comparison of, gosh, I don't know, I'm trying to think of what other good desert movies had that, like Lawrence of Arabia or something, where they're just marching along the hills, riding on their animals. Just, we know we're in this for the long haul. It's there are some visually striking moments in this film that I think if you could separate them from the rest of the film, you could probably even try to convince somebody that this is from an actual blockbuster that did significant gains in the box office.
Now, let's talk about how this movie sounds.
Okay.
So the score. I mean, I'm not going to touch the very 80s soundtrack on this, complete with Ashford and Simpson song on there.
I wish you would. I love the sound of the 80s. Listen, when it comes to, you gave me the list ahead of time, and I know that when it comes to music, that's my weakest category. But I love 80s music. I just love the way it sounds. I may not be able to tell you why, but I know what I like. And what I like is this. I mean, of course, whenever you look at the entire put together choices of the songs, a lot of the songs here in Mac and Me, hold on, I have it right here in front of me. Where is that list? A lot of the songs are all about being apart and coming together. The main theme is called You're Not a Stranger Anymore. Then you have Take Me, I'll Follow You, Send Out a Signal. So it's all about reaching out and finding that person to connect with, to be with. So I always do enjoy whenever movie soundtracks try to have a unified theme like that. And it's not just, we got the license to a Beatles song, to a Jimi Hendrix song, and to an Aerosmith song. So let's just slap those in there and see what happens, because they're popular songs and people will recognize them.
And nothing was written by Frank Stallone, so we're safe there.
Right.
But the score of the film, right? Because it is it's an 80s family action romp type film. And they got Alan Silvestri, pre-Avengers Alan Silvestri to do the score. Now, I mean, if all of a sudden you hear the name Alan Silvestri and you have the Avengers theme playing in your head, yeah, he's that good of a composer. And again, it was one of those movies where it was played perfectly. There was that little theme that would carry through, because that's a signature, right? The main characters, especially if it's an alien kind of thing, they'll have a theme. Mm-hmm. They'll have a theme, and then there's variations on the theme depending on the scene. And Silvestri does that to a T here.
Yeah, because I think the thing about it is that it's hard. We have 5 senses. Well, that's not actually, but we say that we have 5 senses as humans, and cinema is primarily about sound and sight. We don't have the ability to get too much registry from smell or taste or touch. Like they haven't quite cracked any of those. I know there's been experiments in like the 60s for smell-o-vision. Disneyland, of course, is known for doing essentially smell-o-vision, some of the things like the old Muppet Theater. But really, you have to focus all your efforts upon sight and sound. And so really having that unique kind of sound trigger or like quick theme, even if it's just like a 5-second like da 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 da, for like a character when they come on, it just gets people in the mood like, oh, here we go, here comes this character. That's why something like Jaws, with just the one note speeding up the tempo, is iconic for that monster, because that's him. He is a one note creature. He eats everything. There's not any menace. Well, not any menace about him inherently until like you get to The Revenge, where he is apparently has a blood feud against his family. But sound is so important to establish for the audience as kind of like a shorthand. Like if it's a light bouncy tune, it's a light bouncy character. If it's a heavy dark tune, it's a heavy dark character. And you can tell a lot without words or without even showing anything about a character, even before they come on screen, with what the sound is dictating to you.
I think one of the composers that does that really, really well is Murray Gold. And Murray Gold was the one tasked with scoring the Doctor Who BBC series up until Chris Chibnall became the showrunner and Jodie Whittaker became the Doctor. He had that knack of creating themes for the characters. There was Clara's theme, Amy had her theme. So, it's almost like, I hate to draw a wrestling analogy to Doctor Who, but character comes on and their theme song comes on, which is kind of nice.
Here comes the Undertaker.
Oh my God, we can go so long about wrestling theme songs that don't even get me started on that. But it's one of those things where it creates, almost like a welcome to the scene kind of moment. Mm-hmm. Now, this is the first time I ever actually watched this movie, so I was really excited. I'm like,
wait, this is the first time you ever watched this movie?
This was the absolute first time I've ever seen this movie. So when you mentioned
welcome to the rest of your life, my friend.
Oh, I tell you. And when I listened to it, I actually listened to it with headphones on. Sitting on my computer, listening with headphones on. The sound effects work. They, for an 80s film, they played a lot with left-right panning as far as your sound design went. And that just adds so much more to it. I mean, like I love going to the theaters. I love when, you hear like a little scratch over on the left side or a little scratch over on the right kind of thing. And there's something over on there, which is great in the theater. You don't normally get that, on home video, especially, on old VHS tapes. So watching it at home with the headphones on, you really got to hear, there was a lot of smart sound design choices in post-production.
Right. Yeah. And if you want to get a really good example of that, for those listening at home and, wanted just a quick thing of it, go watch the scene where Mac and his family are emerging from the NASA pod and all the stuff is crashing in that NASA room. That's a really good time for where you can get a lot of kind of the left-right differences there that you're talking about.
And it's what you were saying, we do have 5 senses, for the most part. Bruce Willis has 6, but we have 5.
Thank you.
But yeah, if you can close your eyes and appreciate the scene, and it helps visualize it. It helps realize the scene, especially when you're dealing with liver spotted aliens that are being vacuum sucked into a NASA lander.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, those are my notes. What else did you see that really sparked, this to be a good movie to you?
I think, and I know that you'll agree with me when referencing the Star Wars prequels. I love the fact that they use so many practical puppets and that they weren't trying to do as much CG work as they could avoid to do. They're like, let's try to make it grounded. Let's make it real. So there's probably at least 15 different versions of Mac throughout this film because of all the different ways that he bends and stretches his body. So I really do enjoy that. And the one thing I do wish they had a bit more of was more of the family, because I do enjoy the ideas of what you could do with the whole family of aliens. Once they finally do kind of show back up in the film and are in that, what is it, like I think it's like a full-on grocery store. I was going to say convenience store, but like a grocery store. I think there's a lot of fun to be had there about what would happen in a typical suburban area if just, here's a family of aliens. They're not with a spaceship. Because that's the thing. In most movies, the idea is, a spaceship lands and you feel like you're outgunned immediately, technologically wise. But these guys are naked. They are literally as unarmed as you can possibly be, and preposing or prepossessing. And yet people are still freaking out about it. They're like, oh my God, So it kind of brings up the whole, I guess, philosophical and theological ramifications these people have in their psyches about what does this mean? Is there a God anymore? Because there's an alien next to the Cheerios.
I do have to admit that the animatronics on Mac, because it's so small, they had to do a lot of animatronics there. Mm-hmm. It's one of those moments where you sit there and they actually made the character like not necessarily relatable, but enjoyable.
He's cute.
Right? He's cute.
You know what it is? It's his chubby cheeks. I think that's what it is. I think the chubby cheeks are him because the other parents, they're more sunken in their faces. But Mac's got the kind of like chubby cheeks. And I think the reason why they also had to do that is because there's so many times where he has to whistle and, blowing out your cheeks to get the air in your mouth to then make the whistle happen, I think is they wanted to show that, okay, he's whistling. Because if you just show essentially like a blow-up doll, which is its open mouth, just staring up slightly. How do I know that thing's whistling? You need to have some kind of more visual theme other than that, and maybe him holding his hands up. But he's not beautiful looking because it's still a liver spotted baby, which fixes diet. But I think he's cute, and that's and like I said, there's so many different versions of Mac, and I think that they did a lot of love and care into making this a likable creature, for lack of a better word. I
do have to wonder. So I'm going to make another Star Wars reference here because apparently that's all I do is make Star Wars references.
I already made one, so go ahead.
Okay. So Ahmed Best, the guy who was Jar Jar Binks, had a very, loose kind of very flimsy limb walk about him when he was Jar Jar. And when you saw the dad walking around in the desert, it was kind of the same thing. So I wonder if Ahmed Best has seen Mac and Me and maybe took a little bit of that, like that loose limb walk from that to incorporate into Jar Jar Binks.
I love that idea. I think that's fantastic. I hope that that's true. I really do, because as much as we can connect Mac and Me to another great franchise like Star Wars would make me happy beyond all reason. My brain likes to make connections in the actual world of the movie. So for me, the reason why for that funny walk, different gravity. He's used to a different field of gravity from his home planet of, let's say, Uranus than Earth. And also, what's their diet like? Because Mac can drink Coke and he's fine. He doesn't seem to get super hyper from it. Yeah, it kind of revitalizes him. And that's their first aid to the aliens in the cave. Drink a Coke. And I know that Coke is behind this film and they're like, we want a product in here, but it's so fun to me to be like, okay, so if Coke is good for them, if Coke is their water, first of all, where's their planet made out of Coke? And second of all, like, what is their physiology like on the inside?
I wonder now, because as you mentioned, they for opening scene, they're sticking straws into the planet.
They're sucking the planet dry.
So is Uranus made out of Coke? And did they drink all the Coke and basically eliminated the rest of life on Uranus?
Yeah, I think so. I think they suck my Uranus dry. and cut another Coke out of it.
Oh, I need that on a shirt now.
Yeah, they suck Uranus dry. And then they're like, oh man, Earth's got Coke. But I also look forward to the idea and the promise of a sequel at the end of this film, where they said we'll be back with a bubblegum special effect, which was a fun choice. I would love it if they're like, they moved into the neighborhood and it's essentially like, it's those again. It's the annoying neighbors who have the weird habits. You know, essentially, they could have built a franchise in the same vein as the Addams Family, where they really just keep to themselves, but they have such weird habits and traditions. It just irks the rest of the, you know, clean-cut white suburban neighborhood.
What was it with 80s films calling their shot and saying there's going to be a sequel and then not happening? It happened in this one with, you know, with the "We'll Be Back" bubble. Masters of the Universe, when Skeletor kind of pops back out of the
That's right, they called that too, yeah.
Yep. And the Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai.
That's right, they do, yeah.
Right, that the whole little thing, you know, Buckaroo Banzai way back in the 8th dimension or whatever it was, and it's like you called your shot and you missed your shot.
I think what it is that they're hoping that they're kind of holding the studio hostage with the audience, say like, hey, listen, we promised the audience we're going to do this. You're going to make us the liar. Don't make me look like a jerk here. Come on, let's do another one.
So this is what we need. We need, you know, a sequel where Eric and Debbie are still friends. Okay. Mm-hmm. The older brother and the older sister, they actually got married.
Okay. Are we talking a sequel now?
Oh yeah, it's got to be a sequel now.
Okay, I just wanted to say, are you talking sequel now? Are you talking like a potential sequel in like 97? Okay, now go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, and we're gonna call it Mac and Me and Me. One of them's got to have a kid, and
oh, I thought you were gonna put me in that movie because my last name is Me, and I'm like, I'm down to star in this movie. Mac and Me and Me. Hell yeah.
Okay, now that needs to be written. Mac and Me and
well,
Me.
Hey, how about this? I'm Eric's kid. You know, so I'll be down for that. Yeah. Big Mac, Little Mac. Got to put, because that is the reason why. Let's face it. As much as Mac is for mysterious alien creature, it's because it's McDonald's, and they want it to be, oh, it's the Little Mac, and then you can come get a Big Mac after you watch Little Mac.
And if Mac got a job at McDonald's, because now they're American citizens, they can work. I'm all for it. Yeah,
that's right. They can get that same underpaid minimum wage lifestyle that all the other people are now striking against and saying, nope, that's too low. We can't live on that anymore. Thank you.
So before we get to our MVP of the film, we mentioned at the very beginning of the show that it at one point had a 0% tomato meter rating, and it's now up to 4%. Mm-hmm. Is this movie unfairly maligned because it's a McDonald's Coke Baby E.T. ripoff?
I think so. I think if you took out the McDonald's scene, you know, I think that alone is the egregious sin that most people have against it, of like, it's so blatantly obvious. Like, okay, and even in E.T., Elliot full on does, okay, we're doing Reese's Pieces, and he holds it up and he, like, you know, lays them out for E.T. But like, people don't criticize that as hard because we understand that product placement is a thing, you know. And of course, when movies turn to the camera and grin about it, like how they do in Zoolander with the product placement, that's a different story. But here, I think the most egregious part is that they fully go to a McDonald's restaurant. Ronald McDonald is doing magic. They have a dance party, which never would happen at McDonald's. Everyone's having a good time. Even the employees behind the counter are dancing along, not working, just dancing and having a great time at it. I think that that's where people are like, okay, this is too far. Like you're not only doing product placement, but you're doing like product, like fabrication. You're promising above what you could possibly ever deliver. There will never be this. Even if a sad kid did say, I want my birthday party at McDonald's, like, and I want to have like all the presents there and everything, like, it's still not going to be to this level of what they're presenting here. It's still going to be some kids crying in the corner, some guys complaining about, what do you mean you stopped serving breakfast at 10? you know. So I think that's what the main gripe that most people had for this film is. I mean, even the whole Coke is what revives people. So hey, get a Coke if you need to pick me up like Mac. I don't think that's the problem. I think it's that the McDonald's dance number and the whole scene of that.
I will say, like as I mentioned earlier, this was the first time I had ever watched this movie beyond a clip of Paul Rudd had showed on Conan O'Brien. And yeah, I didn't see how it could stay with the 0%. Was it, an earth-shattering movie? No. And, it's, as far as 80s kid adventure type movies with like the Goonies and, as far as, alien-like creatures like Short Circuit, does it hold up to those ones? Maybe not. But it's not a bad movie at all.
It's not a 0%. Like I said at the beginning of this thing, it is not something that is interminable to get through. It is not something that as soon as you watch, you're like, no, and then you click it off.
Yeah.
It's a fun little romp. It's not an Oscar winner for sure, but it's fun.
Okay, so it's come to the point where, we each have an MVP of the film. So, Greg, I'm going to hand it over to you. Who is your MVP of Mac and Me?
MVP for Mac and Me, which I love that rhyme, by the way. And I'm going to keep it going. The MVP of Mac and Me is Little Debbie.
Okay.
Because she rolls with the punches every time it's thrown at her. She's totally cool with Mac. Even when she meets Eric, she's like, what? Oh, okay. And then when she goes with the vacuum strapped to her back, full exorcist up the wall, and is screaming, like a moment later, she's like, okay, cool. I'm good.
I'll admit, I kind of went back and forth on a couple things on my MVP. I was looking at Nick McLean, the director of photography, because it's beautifully shot. For an 80s movie, it's beautifully shot. And I thought about Tina Kasperi, who, played Courtney, Debbie's sister, because again, as we mentioned, she comes off as probably the most realistic in reacting to the scene in front of her. But I'm going to put it in the hands of Jay Caligari, Eric.
Okay,
because aside from, his the movie being smart enough to cast someone who actually is in a wheelchair and suffers from spina bifida in that role, and then not make a big deal about it, and for him to, it's kids actors, right? But I love the dynamic between Eric and Debbie. I love that dynamic. So for me, it's Jay Caligari for carrying a film, and yes, is it his only movie role? Yes, it is. So hopefully he hears this and knows that he's considered an MVP of this film.
I love it. And yes, like you said, he did carry the film, but unlike most people, he carried it in his lap, like how his brother packed all the packages under his lap and says, okay, now take those inside.
And had to wear Chicago Cubs and Chicago Bears shirts all the way through. So
I would love it if Jade in real life was like, but I hated the Chicago Cubs. I'm a San Francisco Giants kind of guy.
I wonder how that is, right? Like if you're a fan of a sports team and your character, is like, can you imagine being a Yankees fan? It's like, no, your character likes the Red Sox. Do you turn that down?
I say, how much am I getting paid? Okay, I'll do it.
Greg, thank you so much for this. Where can we find you on social media and all your podcasts?
Sure. You can find me for Movie Date Night at Movie Date Night on Facebook and Twitter, at Game Friday for the Friday's Game Night. We also have Game_Friday on TikTok and Instagram. And then, of course, Mortal Kombat is Mortal Kombat Pod.
Greg, thank you so much. This has been It's Not That Bad. Now, if you have a movie that you want us to go through and break down, not the negatives, but the positives. If you think there's a movie out there that's unfairly maligned, if it's given a bum rap, or you think it's so bad that we can't find anything out about it, let me know on Twitter. Not That Bad Cast. I'm Jason. Thank you, Greg, so much. We will catch you next time on It's Not That Bad.
We'll be back.
Hey folks, Stefan Shirazi and Renee Richardson here from the Metallica Report.
And we are proud members of the Pantheon podcast family, where the best of music and podcasts unite.
We've got something pretty cool for you. We're giving away an exclusive Metallica merch package worth over $250.
That's a whole lot of Scary Guys, skulls, M72, and other sought-after Metallica swag. And we've made it easy for you to win. Follow and share the Metallica Report, and you're in the game. Go to pantheonpodcast.com/Metallica, enter your email, and hit that button to be entered to win.
And just like that, you're eligible for our monthly exclusive Metallica merch package.
And guess what, rockers? You can enter every month, so just do it. And while we love our global brothers and sisters, the lawyers won't let us ship outside the U.S.